Good afternoon. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. So yeah, this is what my kids got me. Pot of gold. So just continuing our video on the tropicals that in my opinion are fairly easy to grow, has virtually no issues with our summer, has no issues with our winter, and continues to produce fruit. So that would be the Cherimoya, specifically the Cherimoya. However, before we begin though, check it out. Got a nice find today, my local ethnic supermarket. A fun trick or a fun tip about the mangosteens. See the bottom stamp? That indicates how many sections, slices of fruits this particular fruit will have inside here that's edible. So if I open this guy up, there should be 6 little sections that I can eat. Same with this larger fruit here. But yeah, I mean, this is as really as fresh as you can get, just because well, number one, it is quite soft, squishy, and also number two, the stems are still relatively green. So should be able to just crack this guy open using my natural can opener. Yeah, so literally there's 6 sections in here. Me, I normally just like to suck it all in. I still can't quite describe the taste of mangosteen. There's really nothing that's out there that even remotely tastes like it. It's got a hint of sourness, but then right afterwards it's got like a hit of just sweetness with fragrance afterwards. Of course, rambutan. With this, I normally just bite through it. So yeah. And the biggest find of all. Let me So this guy wasn't open, but it actually opened up on the way home. And with durians, I'll give you a tip on how to determine if it's ripe or not, because oftentimes these fruits, good luck, there is no refund policy. You get it, that's it. So with durians, the best way that you can determine if it's ripe or not, there are several methods, but really the best way is, well, number one, assuming it's not open like this. This is for sure a ripened unit, but assuming it's not open, the best method really is if you squeeze between the flesh, if it gives in like that just a bit, that usually is a good indication that it is ripe inside. There's also several methods where you could tell it by the sound if you're familiar with it, but to me, a sure way of determining it is ripened or not is just by pushing the skin and seeing if it gives in just a bit. It should be just a bit soft, but obviously this guy is ripe. And of course, with so the problem with I've seen many cases, but the problem with getting fresh mangosteens and rambutans is oftentimes they're not fresh. They're picked weeks in advance. So again, for mangosteens, make sure it's still nice and soft, okay? And the stem should still be green like that. That's how you know it's a fresh fruit. Because what happens is, if it's not fresh, it's going to be super hard. And inside, when you pry it open, there's a very good chance that you'll see it surrounded by these yellow latex substances. It's not as appetizing as fresh ones. With Rambutan, of course, this one is just a tad old, but most of the time, like most of the fruits that I have are relatively young like this. So it's really, in my opinion, I like them both, the old ones and well, the young ones and the old one. But that's, yeah, for the most part, I really not had any problems with getting fresh Rambutan, unless it's old looking and it's been sitting on the shelf like this. I mean, it should be nice and Velcro-y, if that's a word. So yeah, the cool thing with the durian and the Rambutans is the seeds germinate quite easily. I've had great successes with germinating Rambutan. Same with the durian. Now, germinating and keeping them alive and mature enough to sustain fruits, that's an entirely different situation. Oh, and almost forgot actually, lychees. Another fruit that is also fairly easy to propagate. In fact, if you check this guy out, he's a volunteer. I want to say maybe 2 years ago, we ate the fruit, tossed in there, and there he grows. Perfect spot for it too. I mean, it as you can see, it is relatively shaded. It has no problem with our winter, even for a seedling. Whereas these durian, Rambutan, mangosteen, if it falls below 50 degrees, for the most part, it's game over. But lychees, they surprisingly do pretty well in our area, including seedlings. So let's get back to our topic in hand. The Annonas, specifically the Cherimoya, probably one of the world's best tasting fruits. That being the case, I actually do have a number of them, just because they are so delicious, so easy to grow, and the fruits themselves, if you are lucky, they're not cheap. I mean, last I've checked, they average between $8 to $12 a pound. So that being the case, just grow your own. So let me show you the varieties that I have. So these two are what's being advertised as being Vietnamese Cherimoyas. Though from everything that I've researched, it's more closely aligned to a Dr. White variety. But they're, if you go to your big box store, you'll find these often advertised as being Vietnamese Cherimoyas. One right behind him, or these two, is a Fino de Hete Cherimoya. Thanks to the folks in Spain for developing this particular variety. Cool thing with the Fino de Hete is the fact that the seeds are pretty minimal on this particular variety. As you can see, I mean, the differences between the various varieties, from the foliage perspective of foliage, you really can't tell them apart. I mean, yeah, some are bigger, but from the texture, I mean, it's the same. Well, actually, these should be the same because it's the same tree, but it's really same texture. So, Fino de Hete. Oh, you know what? I keep forgetting this guy back here. This particular Cherimoya is a Dr. White. So he's a Dr. White. And the guy that's right in front of him, surprisingly fast growing for some reason. The Fino de Hete, Dr. White, and this guy were planted at the same time, and yeah, this guy just took off. He is a booth Cherimoya. Yeah, surprisingly very sturdy looking tree. And then there's a tree back here that is kind of a late bloomer. As you can see, he's literally just starting to sprout out with the warmer weather that we've been getting. He is an El Bampo. So with this being the case, with him being in the situation that he's in, with it being a late bloomer, I do want him mostly for this year to focus on foliage growth and root establishment. That being the case, see these fruits here, these flowers I should say. Being that he's a grafted tree, one of the first things he's going to want to do is set flower, produce flower. So, and because in my opinion, I don't want him to spend too much energy on flower production. So I've actually have been taking out the flowers. And this really just doesn't apply to Cherimoyas. It applies to practically all fruit trees. If you want the tree to be focusing more on growth rather than fruit production or flower production, take out the flower. The tree is going to know to just concentrate most of its energy to growing the root system and the foliage, which ultimately is really what you want. I mean, you really, for the first year or two, you really should not have your tree produce fruit unless it's a mature tree. And instead, you do want it to take the couple of years to acclimate to our climate. So, speaking of the climate, these guys can take the sun without any issues. Winter time, they make look kind of sad. In fact, oftentimes they actually kind of resemble this guy right here. You know, where you might see some foliage burns, tip burns from the frost. But for the most part, they bounce right back up. I mean, I've not had any issues with frost on the Cherimoyas. Speaking of Cherimoyas, its cousin is the Etamoya, which the Etamoyas are a cross between the Cherimoya and the sugar apple. Technically, the Etamoya is a bit hardier than the Cherimoya. That just hasn't been my case. So, again, it's just from personal experience. They both do fine in the Central Valley. So, yeah, here's a fruit that's being formed. I want to say there's also a few more that I'm not seeing, but oh, you know what? There is actually one up here. Let me see if I can show it to you. Right there, I think you can see that just a bit. Apologize for the focus, but yeah, with Cherimoyas. So you've got to think about it. Cherimoyas, they originate from the Andes Mountains down in South America. It's pretty humid over there. That being the case, down in their native region, they're self-pollinating due to the humidity. And also, if it's not due to the humidity, then there's native insects in that region that pollinate these guys. Not in Central Valley, probably not in the United States, probably including Florida. You're probably going to want to hand pollinate these guys. What happens is the flowers, see if I can find any. I saw some. I could have sworn I've seen some flowers. Anyhow, oh, well, I guess you could technically call that a flower. But, oh, right here actually. So he hasn't opened up yet. But what's going to happen is once the flowers, they come in two stages. When this guy opens up its flower, it's going to become a female. And how you can tell if it's a female is the flowers are going to be partially open. And then later that evening, the same day, it generally becomes a male, which would be actually kind of something like this, where it opens all the way. So what you want to do is then you want to wait until it becomes a male, collect the pollen from the male, and then the following day look for a female flower, and then using a brush manually pollinate that female flower. So what happens in the native climate is, due to the humidity, the pollens, as it transitions from a female to a male, the pollens actually get stuck to the flower, and that's how it self-pollinates. But yeah, not here. So because these guys are fairly young, I want to say they've been in the ground maybe either 2 or 3 years. I do want most of the trees to just focus on root establishment. So that's why I've not pollinated these guys at all. The 2 that you saw, they just, from the off chance, I mean, they just somehow pollinated themselves. But for the most part, you're probably going to want to hand pollinate these guys. So anyhow, oh, you know what? Speaking of propagating from seed, the cool thing with the Cherimoya is, let me see if I can find some volunteers here. Oh, you know what? There is actually one down here. I want to say he's back here. Yeah, right here. They germinate quite easily from seed. He's a volunteer. Toss, you know, we ate the fruit, toss the seeds down here, and there he goes. From seed, they generally take about 3 years before the tree is then able to produce fruits for you. So that's Cherimoya for you. I've got a few more mature Cherimoyas in the front, which I will now take you to. So here's the front yard. So right in front of me is a Cherimoya of unknown variety. Admittedly, I need to do a much better job of pruning him. But as you can see, he's doing great though. Loving the shade. I will need to prune him back heavily. You know what? I think I see a fruit or two. Let me see if I can get it closer for you. So again, I've not really been actively pollinating this tree, but because of the position that it probably is in my yard, I do actually see some fruits that are being formed, which is odd. Let's see if I can get to you right there. So yeah, I do need to prune this jungle back heavily, just because, I mean, it's becoming a challenge for me to come back here and hand pollinate this tree. But he is a Cherimoya of unknown variety. So I should mention the differences between the various varieties. It really comes down to a couple of items. Size of the fruit, number of seeds in that fruit, and overall sugar content of that fruit, juiciness of that fruit. But for the most part, I really can't tell them apart. A Cherimoya is a Cherimoya. So that's a Cherimoya. Got another Cherimoya here, which I also, again, just because it's like virtually a jungle in here, I can't get in here, but I do need to prune this guy back heavily to promote better airflow in here. It's becoming like a no man's land back here. It's like if you happen to lose yourself in there, you can't find your way out. So yeah. Yeah, I also need to go in there and hand pollinate this guy. I don't know if there's any fruits that it has set by itself. Let me see. Maybe not. I'm not seeing anything. But then again, the fruits are, I mean, it being that they're green, it's not very obvious if it's holding a fruit or not. So, another Cherimoya. So speaking of Cherimoya, This is the one that was a volunteer. It's I want to say he's in the ground either the second or the third year this year. But my plan on this is to graft different anonas onto this particular rootstock. But he's doing so well though. I may just leave him alone unless he branches out, which I can do by pugging him, and then he should grow into multiple branches. But yeah, I'll have to kind of keep an eye on this guy. So here is how easy these seedlings are to grow here. I know I've covered it last week, well, my previous video, but yeah, they are like crazy easy to propagate from seed. In fact, most time it really is just from seeds that these guys are grown from. If you look at the inside there, it's it's actually still holding on to the seed. That's insane. But as you can see, these are brand new seedlings. Yeah, Cherimoyas, they make great rootstocks in that the roots from the seedlings, once they're matured to, you know, maybe like a year or two, most nurseries simply graft other anonas on top of it, just because they are quite cold hardy and very stable. So Cherimoya, one of the best tasting fruits. So yeah, it's just the only downside again is just you're gonna want to hand pollinate. I mean, as you can see, in my case, I didn't hand pollinate, but yet, you know, you might get lucky and get a fruit or two off of a tree. But if you really want to try the fruits, you're just gonna have to hand pollinate. It's not that difficult. So anyhow, well, yeah, that's it. Have a happy Father's Day. All right, have a good afternoon. I had the greatest idea. Inventors out there, please hear me out, okay? A durian cologne for men. That is probably the world's greatest idea. I mean, someone out there has got to be able to do it. I know you probably can't smell it, but I'm surrounded by flies because they're loving it as well. So let's crack this guy open. Yeah, luckily when a durian is ripe, like this guy right here, Jesus, this is very ripe. Man, look at that. Wow. It's also nothing that I can describe that tastes like a durian, besides just pure sweetness. I should warn you, they are a bit pricey. Fresh ones anyhow. I want to say I got this guy for $13 a pound, and he's a pretty small guy. I want to say I paid $40 somewhat for it, but I justify it by telling myself that the seeds, I'm going to propagate them. But again, propagating these from seeds and waiting 6-7 years to see if it produces fruit, that's a totally different story. I guess it's no different than having kids. Hopefully, when you grow old, they'll take care of you. But yeah, durians. I know you might get lucky and find frozen ones, but you really have got to try the fresh ones if you are able to. Just get along from your bank and grab a few of these. I mean, they are really, really good. And better yet, if you can grow them in your climate, especially folks that are in Hawaii, for example, grow them in your backyard. So, yeah, one of my goals really is to actually put this guy in the ground in my ultra sensitive section in that corner of the yard. But yep, durian. If you could just don't mind the smell. I mean, I like the smell. It smells good to me. I mean, again, durian cologne for men. I definitely would buy it. But if you don't mind the smell, it is just really good. So, durian. All right.